For as long as we have records of humankind's musings about the cosmos, there have been two interwoven threads that have documented our experience with it. One of these threads is the empirical, the desire to know and understand the natural world through observation and later measurement. To recognize the patterns and processes well enough to be able to predict the behavior of the world around us and to be able to use that knowledge to create better lives for ourselves and our children. The other, however, is less epistemological and technical, to use the modern versions of Aristotle's forms of knowledge. This second thread is the aesthetic appreciation of the natural world, a recognition of its inherent beauty and its ability to create within our consciousness a non-rational but no less real response to what we experience. And so it is that I can sit on my back porch, also known as the deck of the Adrift at Sea, with my faithful companion, Captain Charlie Pants, and take in the remarkable sunsets often seen here in the desert Southwest. With one part of my mind, I'm overwhelmed by the ever-evolving parade of colors, from fiery reds and brilliant oranges that play across the sky and through the clouds, to the more subtle and sublime hues of pink and purple that stretch and fade imperceptibly into the coming canopy of night. I can understand why the Greeks wrote so movingly the Hesperides, goddesses of the sunset and keepers of the place where Apollo stored his golden chariot. I am invariably moved to both awe and peace by the experience. Paradoxically, I am elevated and humbled to be witness to such a casual display of fireworks, as if nature herself had nothing better to do than show off a bit for my pleasure. It is a gift for which I had to do nothing but still myself enough to be present in the moment and consent to receive what has been offered at no cost to me, but just a little time. Another part of my mind, however, is simultaneously filled with the knowledge of the physical processes that create the spectacle I am now experiencing. I understand the processes that took place in the core of the sun hundreds of thousands of years ago, that fused together hydrogen atoms under enormous pressures and at incredible temperatures in such a way that a photon of light, a fundamental particle of matter and energy, was created. I know the processes by which that photon made its way from the sun's core to its surface, and so was emitted there to travel for some 499 seconds across space and through time to enter the Earth's atmosphere. I have long studied the mysterious properties of photons like these, the relationships that govern the particle wave's frequency and its relationship to the energy of the photon. I have learned the process and derived the mathematical models that characterize that photon's interaction with the atoms of nitrogen and oxygen gas that make up the Earth's atmosphere, as well as a photon's interactions with particles of dust and salt suspended within that ocean of air. With all of this knowledge, I understand on a technical level the processes that have rendered this spectacular display of luxurious luminescence. There are those who have asked me, has your education in the physical processes that produce the experiences you have of this universe spoiled or ruined the beauty of them for you? Has becoming a scientist lessened your appreciation of the aesthetic aspects of the natural world? While I cannot answer this for every scientist, I will say that this is unequivocally not the case for me. Rather, my understanding of how what I experience in this world occurs leads me to a greater feeling of awe in almost every case. While ignorance may be bliss in some circumstances, when it comes to my recognition of the beauty of nature's art, I find that knowing heightens rather than diminishes the experience. I think most of my colleagues in the sciences would agree with this sentiment. And from what I've read and heard, the same is true for those who engage in the forms of inquiry usually gathered under the banner of humanities. So much music, visual art, and writing is inspired by the natural world. Think of Haydn's Water Music, Van Gogh's Starry Night, or Whitman's Leaves of Grass, to name just a few examples. And then also, there's that group of individuals who I think integrate these two threads even more tightly, the naturalists. My own cultural tradition is full of these inquirers: Muir, Lewis and Clark, Audubon, Powell, wanderers who saw the world around them through the paired lenses of science and art. In this, our 200th episode of the Scientific Odyssey, we give over the canvas to other voices, those who have attempted to capture the natural world through the prism of many perspectives. As we voyage through their words, I hope that we too can capture a bit of their vision in our sails, and thus be propelled towards new horizons. Hello, and welcome to this special episode of the Scientific Odyssey. In 1952, when I first crossed Chase County, I was 12 years old and riding in the front seat as navigator while my father drove our Pontiac Chieftain with its splendid hood ornament, an Indian's head whose chromium nose we followed for half a decade over much of America. In the last weeks, I've probed my memory to find even one detail of that initial passage into the western prairies. What did I see, feel? Nothing now, except our route returns. My guess is that I found the grasslands little more than miles to be got over. After all, that's the way Americans cross Kansas. Still do. In 1965, when I came out of the Navy, I drove across the prairie again on a visit to California, and the grasslands looked different to me, so alive and varied. And now I believe that 2 years of watching the Atlantic Ocean changed the way I viewed landscape, especially levelish, rolling things. I also began to see the prairies as native ground, the land my hometown sat just out of sight of, and I began to like them not because they demand your attention like mountains and coasts, but because they almost defy absorbed attention. At first, to be here, to be now, was hard for me to do on the prairie. I liked the clarity of line in a place that seemed to require me to bring something to it, and open to it actively. See far, see little. I learned a prairie secret: take the numbing distance in small doses, and gorge on the little details that beckon. Like its moisture, the prairie doesn't give up anything easily, unless it's horizon and sky. Search out its variation, its colors, its subtlety. It's not that I had to learn to think flat. The prairies rarely are. But I had to begin thinking open and lean, seeing without set points of obvious focus, noticing first the horizon, and then drawing my vision back towards middle distance where so little appears to exist. I came to understand that the prairies are nothing but grass, as the sea is nothing but water. That most prairie life is within the place, under the stems, below the turf, beneath the stones. The prairie is not a topography that shows its all, but rather a vastly exposed place of concealment, like the geodes so abundant in the country, where the splendid lies within the plain cover. At last I realized that I was not a man of the sea or coasts or mountains, but a fellow of the grasslands. Once I understood that, I began to find all sorts of reasons why, and here comes one. I'm driving west of Emporia, Kansas, on Highway 50, where it takes up the course of the 2-mile wide and shallow valley of the east-running Cottonwood River. And I've just entered the Prairie Hills through a trough of wooded bottom on this route that runs some way into the uplands before it rises out of the floodplains to reveal the open spread of grasses. The change is sudden, stark, surprising. If I kept heading west, I would ride among the grasses, tall, middle, short, until I crossed the prairie and the plains and climbed into the foothills of the Rockies. By following Route 50 into Chase County, up out of the shallowed woodlands, out of the soybean and sorghum bottoms, and into the miles of something too big, too wild to be called a meadow, I am recapitulating human history, retracing in an hour the 65 million year course of our evolution from some small bottom-dwelling mammal that began to crawl trees and evolve, and then climb down and move into the East African savanna. It was tall grass that made man stand up. To be on all fours, to crouch in a 6-foot-high world of thick cellulose, is to be blind and vulnerable. People may prefer the obvious beauty of mountains and seacoasts, but we are bipedal because of savanna. We are human because of tall grass. When I walk the prairie, I like to take along the notion that while something primal in me may long for the haven of the forest, its apprenticeship in the trees, it also recognizes this grand openness as the kind of place where it became itself. Taken from Prairie Earth by William Least Heat Moon. So here we are, 200 episodes in. Nearly 6 years after we began our journey, we have reached this milestone, and we celebrate with this episode. This is an episode filled with poetry and prose selected by members of the crew, often read by them as well. I hope you enjoy this voyage, guided along by the music, as always, of the Blue Dot Sessions, and experience something different, something that takes you away from perhaps the cares and trials of this present world into a place where you can be inspired and you can enjoy the world around you. So without further ado, let's get on with more readings.
We do not take a ship at all, and yet we sail the seas, the north and south, and east and west, in every sort of breeze. Our journeying is very swift. We must be back today. We came out here to study, so we cannot stop for play. We do not take an airship to go into the sky, and yet we visit in the air and watch the moon go by. The sky is very pretty, but we haven't time to stay. We're studying this all in a book. It isn't only play. Safe in our seats with book in hand, we travel swiftly through the land. We sail the sea and sky and all, and never fear to sink or fall. We make far journeys every day, but never stay abroad to play. Annette Wynne, Geography Journeys.
An original composition by Susan McMaster, performed by Susan McMaster, Alan McClure, and Colin Morton.
Science Songs number 1.
On perceiving a stable environment,
The world
shifts,
as he moves through,
he approaches,
it expands,
passes,
it turns,
nods, it
alters.
elegant and precise are the compensations for movement,
Of the eye,
for movement,
of the head,
for movement,
of the field, of the world as a whole,
so adaptable,
is the universe,
to a self
centered.
man.
Come, said the muse, sing me a song no poet has yet chanted. Sing me the universal. In this broad earth of ours, amid the measureless grossness and the slag, enclosed and safe within its central heart, nestles the seed, perfection. By every life a share, or more or less. None born, but what is born, concealed or unconcealed, the seed is waiting. Lo, keen-eyed, towering science, as from tall peaks the modern overlooking, successive absolute fiats issuing. Yet again, lo, the soul above all science, for it has history gathered like husks around the globe. For it, the entire star myriads roll through the sky, in spiral routes by long detours, as a much tacking ship upon the sea. For it, the partial to the permanent flowing. For it, the real to the ideal tends. For it, the mystic evolution, not the right only justified, but what we call evil also justified. Forth from their masks, no matter what, from the huge festering trunk, from craft and guile and tears, health to emerge and joy universal. Out of the bulk, the morbid and the shallow, out of the bad majority, the varied countless frauds of men and states, electric, antiseptic yet, cleaving, sufficing all, only the good is universal. Over the mountain, growths, disease, and sorrow, an uncaught bird is ever hovering, high in the purer, happier air. From imperfection's murkiest cloud darts always forth one ray of perfect light, one flash of heaven's glory. To fashions, customs, discord, to the mad babbled din, the deafening orgies, soothing each lull, a strain is heard, just heard, from some far shore, the final chorus sounding. Oh, the blessed eyes, the happy hearts, to see that know the guiding thread so fine among the mighty labyrinth. And thou, America, for thy scheme's culmination, its thought and its reality, for these, not for thyself, thou has arrived. Thou too surroundest all, embracing, carrying, welcoming all. Thou too, by pathways broad and new, to the ideal tendest. The measured faiths of other lands, the grandeurs of the past are not for thee, but grandeurs of thine own. Deific faiths and amplitudes, absorbing, comprehending all, eligible to all. All for immortality. Love like the light silently wrapping all. Nature's amelioration blessing all. The blossoms, fruits of ages, orchards divine and certain, forms, objects, growths, humanities, to spiritual images ripening. Give me, O God, to sing that thought. Give him or her I love this quenchless faith. In thy ensemble, whatever else withheld, withhold not from us belief and plan of thee enclosed in time and space. Health, peace, salvation universal. Is it a dream? Nay, but the lack of it the dream, and failing it, life's lore and wealth a dream, and all the world a dream. Song of the Universal, Walt Whitman.
These many months half hopelessly, from dune and cliff and shingle, I have watched the shining west to see that star which will not mingle with other stars, the evening one, the radiant follower of the sun, filled full of liquid amber light above the breaker's onset, unclouded, vast, serene. Tonight, the giant flower of sunset unfolded all its purity and high perfection over me. The crescent moon, but 3 days old, upon that airy splendor, swam like a silver shell. Behold, what light more pure, more tender, if such can be, began to shine low down above the ocean line, untwinkling. Oh, how softly pure, how radiantly tender, too lovely for a man to endure. I thought I would surrender my very life, my very soul, for anything so beautiful. Like one half mad, I walked the dune. I could not watch my footing. I could not see the crescent moon, but only Venus floating. Low down, low down. She set too soon. Then I beheld the little moon. I stood beside the cove that lies below the promontory. There shone, there took me by surprise, the crescent, clothed in glory. Between the cliff brow and the wave, shone like a candle in a cave. Robinson Jeffers, The Return of Venus.
"'Twas noontide of summer, and mid-time of night, and stars in their orbits shone pale through the light. of the brighter, cold moon, mid planets her slaves, herself in the heavens, her beam on the waves. I gazed a while on her cold smile, too cold for me. There passed as a shroud, a fleecy cloud, and I turned away to thee, proud evening star, in thy glory afar. And dear thy beam shall be, for joy to my heart is the proud part thou bearest in heaven at night, and more I admire thy distant fire than that colder, lowly light. Evening Star by Edgar Allan Poe. Bright star, would I were steadfast as thou art, not in lone splendor hung aloft the night, and watching with eternal lids apart, like nature's patient, sleepless eremite. The moving waters at their priest-like task of pure ablution around earth's human shores, or gazing on the new, soft-fallen mask of snow upon the mountains and the moors. No, yet still steadfast, still unchangeable, pillowed upon my fair love's ripening breast, to feel forever its soft fall and swell, awake forever in a sweet unrest, still to hear her tender taken breath, and so live ever, or else swoon to death. John Keats.
From man or angel, the great architect did wisely to conceal and not divulge his secrets to be scanned by them who ought rather admire. Or if they list to try conjecture, he his fabric of the heavens hath left to their disputes, perhaps to move his laughter at their quaint opinions wide. Hereafter, when they come to model the heaven and calculate the stars, how they will wield the mighty frame, how build, unbuild, contrive to save appearances, how grid the sphere with concentric and eccentric scribbled o'er cycle and epicycle, orb in orb. John Milton, Paradise Lost.
The moon was but a chin of gold a night or two ago, and now she turns her perfect face upon the world below. Her forehead is of amplest blonde, her cheek a beryl hewn, her eye unto the summer dew, the likest I have known. Her lips of amber never part, but what must be the smile upon her friend she could confer, were such her silver will. And what a privilege to be but the remotest star, for certainly she will take her way beside your palace door. Her bonnet is the firmament, the universe her shoe, the stars, the trinkets at her belt, her divinities of blue. Emily Dickinson.
If you have trouble holding on, if you can't understand why things are exactly as they appear, or else never that at all, then it makes perfect sense that the whole fine structure can dissolve at a whim. Something come from nothing, be here, there, or nowhere. Stars change their courses at the bid of a random need. And a heart that beats or dies without known cause is just reason breaking free. He's probably here, maybe there, nowhere at all if he's moving too fast. His answering service is often at a loss. He came into my life so fast I couldn't see where he'd been before. But the speed of light is no limit at all to this super-physical star. Something from nothing is a matter of charm. Two places at once, mere simultaneity. And time runs backwards to fit his needs. I called you next week, don't you remember? I'm waiting for the moment when the whole thing collapses. He claims the chance is infinitely small. I tell him he's pushed to the very edge. At singular extremes, the most unexpected is most likely of all. It could happen anytime, even yesterday. But until it does, what a glorious, glowing singularity. The pull that holds us together can't be explained just by our words, by the things we do. What can account for my wandering ellipse, your far-flung loop, how we keep returning against all sense? Baffled by light, I peer not at stars, but at dark distances between. See streams of ancient particles pouring everywhere. Ghostly dimensions overlapping ours. Old lumpy debris scattered here and there. Burnt out daydreams, one's about to form. How much of the pull in our strange, quirky dance comes from matter too tenuous to shine? Dark galaxies.
Selections from Dark Galaxies by Susan McMaster. Music by Jennifer Giles and Ulrich Hubener.
The rotation began in the center and then gradually spread, taking in wider and wider circles. The first effect was to separate two great masses, one consisting of the rare, hot, dry, called the ether, the other of the opposite categories and called air. The ether took the outer, the air the inner place. From the air were next separated clouds, water, earth, and stones, the dense, the moist, the dark and cold, and all the heaviest things collected in the center as a result of the circular motion. And it was from these elements, when consolidated, that the earth was formed. But after this, in consequence of the violence of the whirling motion, the surrounding fiery ether tore stones away from the earth and kindled them into stars. Anaxagoras.
It must have been 9:30 before we left Calistoga, and night came fully ere we struck the bottom of the grade. I have never seen such a night. It seemed to throw calumny in the teeth of all the painters that ever dabbled in starlight. The sky itself was of a ruddy, powerful, nameless, changing color, dark and glossy as a serpent's back. The stars, by innumerable millions, struck boldly forth like lamps. The Milky Way was bright, like a moonlit cloud. Half heaven seemed Milky Way. The greater luminaries shone, each more clearly than a winter's moon. Their light was dyed every sort of color: red like fire, blue like steel, green like the tracks of sunset. And so sharply did each stand forth that its own luster, that there was no appearance of that flat, star-spangled arch we know so well in pictures. But all the hollow of heaven was one chaos of contesting luminaries, a hurly-burly of stars. Against this, the hills and rugged treetops stood out redly dark. As we continued to advance, the lesser lights and Milky Way first grew pale and then vanished. The countless hosts of heaven dwindled in number by successive millions. Those that still shone had tempered their exceeding brightness and fallen back into their customary, wistful distance. And the sky declined from its first bewildering splendor into the appearance of a common night. Slowly this change proceeded, and still there was no sign of any cause. Then a whiteness like mist was thrown over the spurs of the mountain. Yet a while, and as we turned a corner, a great leap of silver light and a net of forest shadows fell across the road, and upon our wondering wagonful, and swimming low among the trees, we beheld a strange, misshapen, waning moon, half tilted on her back. Where are ye when the moon appears? So the old poet sang, half taunted to the stars, bent upon a courtly purpose. as the sunlight round the dim earth's midnight tower of shadow pours, streaming past the dim, wide portals, viewless to the eyes of mortals, till it floods the moon's pale islet or the morning's golden shores. So sings Mr. Trowbridge with noble inspiration. And so had the sunlight flooded that pale islet of the moon, and her lit face put out one after another that galaxy of stars. The wonder of the drive was over, but by some nice conjunction of clearness in the air and fit shadow in the valley where we traveled, we had seen for a little while that brave display of the midnight heavens. It was gone, but it had been, nor shall I ever again behold the stars with the same mind. He who has seen the sea commoved with a great hurricane thinks of it very differently from him who has seen it only in a calm. And the difference between a calm and a hurricane is not greatly more striking than that between the ordinary face of night and the splendor that shone upon us in that drive. Two in our wagon knew night as she shines upon the tropics, but even that bore no comparison. The nameless color of the sky, the hues of starfire, the incredible projection of the stars themselves starting from their orbits, so that the eye seemed to distinguish their positions in the hollow of space. These were the things that we had never seen before, and never shall see again. Robert Louis Stevenson, Starry Drive. As I write these closing words for this episode, I'm once again at the navigator's post on the deck of the adrifted sea with the captain lying at my feet with his ball. It is the middle of the afternoon, and the summer monsoon flow has once again brought rain to the southern end of the Colorado Plateau. Between my backyard and downtown Flagstaff, a half a dozen miles to my north, there's a thunderstorm cell. I can see the sheets of rain over the rooftops and can hear the low rolling thunder generated by bolts of lightning superheating the air around them. More than anything, though, the experience is dominated by the sound of the thunderstorm's outflow of cooling and descending air whipping through the ponderosa pines that are so ubiquitous here. The tops of the trees sway back and forth in the ebb and flow of those invisible currents, not unlike giant versions of the stalks of wheat grown in the plains of America and Canada that reveal the Chinook wind as it is carried along. The sound is encompassing and enveloping, rising and falling, occasionally punctuated by the locomotive-like roll of the aforementioned thunder. If you can, close your eyes and see if you can hear it. Imagine the coolness of the wind across your skin on what was, just a few minutes ago, a hot summer afternoon. Part of becoming a scientist, at least for me, was learning how to watch, to observe. I really don't know which came first, the desire to know or the understanding of the need to stop and pay attention. Probably, as is so often the case, they developed together as I went through this world, guided and nurtured by those kind enough to take an interest in my development and patient enough to teach me how to slow down. It's such a gift that I've been given. So often, it's easy to live life fast, to have so many things to do. I hope this episode will remind you to pause from time to time and to look around for the beauty right there with you. Perhaps you can do that now. We can wait. There's time. Look closely. Pay attention to the details. Draw in that full experience. What do you see? What do you hear? What is your skin telling you? Do the scents bring back memories of times gone by? For me, I'm taken back to an evening a long time ago in Medford, Oregon, when a storm like this filled the air with an energy that animated a group of friends and me. The sun was setting and the horizon was on fire while electricity crackled through the air. My hope is that the words we've shared in this episode will bring you some measure of comfort and joy during what is a difficult time. I hope that you'll be able to return to them whenever you need to find a refuge from whatever storms you may encounter in life. And as we close this episode, more than anything, I would like to give you all a great deal of thanks. You, as the crew of the Odyssey, is what makes this journey go. For this episode especially, I'd like to thank Micah, and Avon, and Mark, and Sarah. All of the episode's poetry was selected by members of the crew as a way of sharing with each other a bit of our journey together.
Crew member Micah joining the Odyssey in Portland, Oregon. Full sails.
祝你在自己的旅程上迎风远航，下次见。
Until next time, full sails on your journey.